All right, sorry for the delay. I'm going to call the Wednesday, March 12th, 2025 meeting of the Essex Junction City Council to order. I understand we have some agenda changes, no additions. Going to propose kind of reshuffling the deck here a bit. We're going to, how to explain this? The night will proceed as follows. This is what I'm proposing anyway. We start with the audit presentation. We move to the solar array at Global. We discuss general rules and personnel regulations after that. Then we take up the Brownell MOU. Following that, we'll talk about Ordinance 21 and then continue with F and G unchanged. Just need a motion. I move that we do what I just explained.
Also,
Excellent. Amber, are you here with us?
trying to write that down.
I'm here.
All right. Does that make sense to you? Excellent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Agenda's changed. Public to be heard. This is the portion of the meeting folks can bring comments, questions, concerns regarding topics that are part of the meeting tonight and that are not. We have a very busy meeting with a lot of guests tonight, so I'm going to hold anyone that does this to the 2-minute time limit that we have on the meeting rules. Is there anyone in the room or on Zoom that has anything they would like to share with the City Council? George Dunbar, come on up in the room.
My name is George Dunbar. I'll bypass my comments that I was going to, I'll reserve one. I'll talk to you either afterwards on one question I had that may be pertinent to take care of before the annual meeting. But
Okay.
So I want to talk about regarding the Brownell MOU. I guess I'd ask that the council begins their discussion on the subject, that you provide some background on the basis for the document and why it is deemed necessary. To my knowledge, we've operated without such a document for 100 years, so I'm curious as to what has changed, that a document needs to be adopted, which party initiated the document, and what you hope to gain from having said document. I'd like to share some concerns of mine as it pertains to the details itself for consideration during your deliberation. Regarding the section on library closures, I would resist abdicating your responsibility to the sole purview of the library trustees. As the document clearly outlines and stipulates, it is the council that has the responsibility for employees and their safety, as well as the responsibility for risk management and liability. On its face, it seems to assume that the library trustees are more cautious and concerned with the library staff's safety or needs, which I'm confident is not the case. The document directs the council to change the personnel policy to state that the city manager may close a city department except for the library. Now let's imagine a situation, for whatever reason, the library trustees left the library open while the city manager closed other departments. And then something happens to someone or something at the library. The city ultimately bears any liability to adverse outcomes and exposure to potential civil actions. Based on this, I would not relinquish that level of control. If you wish to provide the opportunity to allow the library trustees to close the Brownell, then either work through the city manager, as other departments would be expected to do, or provide language that lets them take the action unilaterally, but without providing compensation for the staff. Again, the council is ultimately responsible for the operations and finances of the city. Residents expect the library to be open and available for the hours advertised and funded. Should the library trustees deem closure necessary, but feel they are unable or unwilling to work through the city manager, then in my view, that needs to be absent the cost to the residents for that loss of services.
George, I'm afraid you're at time if you can just finish your thought.
Okay. Secondly, the section on budget development. The last paragraph states that the library trustees will work with the library director to make changes within established budget line items as needs change throughout the year, within the context of the budget adopted by the voters. Unfortunately, this seems to be in violation of the charter and would require a charter change. Paragraph 905 of the charter, appropriations and transfers. Paragraph C clearly states that the manager may at any time transfer unencumbered appropriation balance or portion thereof between the general classification of expenditures of an office. It does not allow for department heads, other boards, or delegates. Lastly, if you continue to feel the document still needs to be in effect after 100 years of operation without one, I would urge you to limit the document's life and place an end date at which time it can be reviewed and adjusted. As you are doing with the MOU the other MOU on your agenda regarding the police services from the town, or was that any other MOU that you're currently operating under? There exists a finite life of the document for review, changes, and or continued need.
George. Thank you, appreciate it. Yep. And please do feel free to stick around for that part of the conversation and/or email. Is there anyone else in the room or anyone online that has anything else they'd like to share? Please raise your hand on Zoom, or if you're having trouble with that, unmute and introduce yourself. I'm not seeing anyone, so I think we will move on, try to make sense of the agenda I just changed to the FY24 audit presentation, and Bill Kaiser joining us online for that.
Hello, everyone, can you hear me?
We got you. Thanks for joining us. We have Jess Morris is here too, our Director of Finance Director.
Hello, Jess. All right, Jess, do you want to start with anything? Or? All right, good to go. All right, hello, everyone. I am Bill Kaiser. I'm a shareholder at Consultant Sergeant in St. Albans, Vermont. We've been auditing the city for the last few years, and we wrapped up the June 30, 2024 fiscal year audit just a few weeks ago. It was about late January, I believe, we finalized the financial statements. So at this point, you should have final drafts in front of you. Jess and I just wrapped up the data collection form and federal clearinghouse filings earlier this month. So tonight, we've officially concluded the 2024 audit, and we'll get ready for 2025. For June 30th, we issued an unmodified opinion. It was a clean audit overall. There were no material adjustments that we had to make or propose to management. Overall, the books were in very good shape. For the second year in a row, the city was required to have a federal single audit, A133 audit, for having federal expenditures greater than $750,000. The major program tested this year was different. In the past few years that the city's had the single audit, the DOT awards for the Crescent Connector and the Pearl Street projects had been tested. This year, the ARPA funds needed to be tested as a high-risk major program. So you'll notice in the back of the financial statements, we had no findings on the single audit testing for ARPA. And you'll also notice the recognition of the ARPA revenues that resulted in a large surplus in the general fund for 2024. I do want to note all of these amounts were expended for payroll purposes. The council voted for that in 2024. That was a change. But overall, the ARPA funds were elected to be recognized under lost revenue replacement. And therefore, they were allowed to be used for payroll. As of June 30, 2024, you'll also note in the general fund, there is an assignment of the surplus to be used for the Lincoln Street renovations, which was the original intent of the ARPA monies. For the single audit, we were required to test 40% of the total federal expenditures, and ARPA just got us over that threshold. So there was no additional testing required of the Crescent Connector project this year. During the single audit, we are required to do a more strict test of the city's internal controls and ensure that they're being followed properly, as well as making sure that the grant funds expended were allowable costs. And if any matching requirements were necessary, those requirements were met too. During the testing that we did, there were no findings noted or errors and issues in relation to ARPA funds or overall. We had no additional internal control recommendations to the finance department. I'd also like to note, after year end, Jess put together an entire new list of internal controls and key control document that was available for us during the audit. And I believe at this point, the council has reviewed all of that. Is that correct, Jess? That's all been approved at this point, yeah. All right, so getting into the financial statements, and the actual results of June 30, 2024. The financial statements consistent with prior years start with the MD&A, which is a year-over-year reflection of the finances of the city. This is a nice document. Management puts this together and highlights both future expectations or plans for the city, but also because the financial statements are not comparative, this document will show year-over-year comparisons to show differences between fiscal year 23 and 24. The government-wide financial statements are next and reported on the accrual basis of accounting. In 2023, taxes receivable were new for the fiscal year as they start being billed by the city rather than the town. So in 2024, you'll notice if you look at comparisons to prior year, the delinquent tax receivable balance has increased, which would be expected now that the city is billing. 2024 was the first full year of the city billing taxes. The 23 taxes were pulled over from the town for the city to be responsible for collections. But those are on the books now. There is the receivables are net with an allowance for doubtful collections of $30,000. Overall, the city continues to have a strong cash position with total cash balances of $13.5 million. In prior years, the cash balance was reflected as a due from the town. This year, I do want to note there's a due from the town of about $3,000. However, that amount is strictly due to shared services reconciliations at year end. The town is no longer holding any cash on behalf of the city. Consistent with prior years, also utility collections and AR are extremely successful year over year. There is no allowance for any of the utility billings at June 30, 2024. So anticipated collections are strong in all the proprietary or enterprise funds. The fund financial statements beginning on 2 pages later are on the modified accrual accounting. These are more similar to a cash basis financial statement and really reflect the items that are budgeted for, especially in the general fund each year. The receivables in the general fund consist of 2022 and 23 tax period billings and delinquencies. Any delinquencies prior to the 2022 tax billing period, like I said, are still with the town and they're responsible for collection on those. The city is required to reserve for any delinquent taxes not received 60 days after year end. So along with the allowance for doubtful accounts is also a reserve that you'll see in the liability section for $119,000. This is an increase of $46,000 in the prior year audit. Overall, not a concern that would increase. Naturally, it's going to now that the city is recording its own receivables for delinquent taxes. That balance is expected to go up, but you want to keep it at a minimum. It's just this is a required reserve for anything not collected and available within 60 days to the city. The capital projects AR is strictly related to grant revenues from the DOT on amounts expended from the Crescent Connector project that have not yet been received or billed and received by the city at year end. Also in the liability section, you'll notice about $1,260,000 of deferred grant revenue. This revenue is considered unavailable because it was not billed and collected within 60 days after year end. So on the fund financial statements, all of that 1.2 million will be part of revenues in 2025 when they're collected, and that'll reverse the deficit in theory, reverse the deficit that you see in the capital projects fund at June 30, 2024. In the 2023 financial statements, like I mentioned during the single audit segment, there's a deferred ARPA funds for unrecognized revenues. These funds were fully recognized in 2024 and no longer are any amounts deferred for ARPA. You'll notice this on the statement of revenues and grant revenues in the grant income line towards the top of that page. where all those funds are hitting the general fund as revenue in 2024. Down at the bottom of the balance sheet are the equity restrictions or the fund balance restrictions that I had mentioned. Pages 27 and 28 of the footnotes detail out the amounts for committed, non-spendable, and assigned fund balances. Currently, the general fund balance is about just over $5 million. And of that amount, sorry, the funds raised of that amount is funds raised and unspent from the local options tax committed fund balance of $1,058,000. $2.9 million has been assigned by management for specific future expenditures, and $136,000 is made up of prepaid expenditures and inventory in the non-spendable category of fund balance. The remaining unassigned fund balance in the general fund is $865,000. That falls below the maximum unassigned fund balance policy that the city has. It's about 7.5% of the future expenditures is what is currently unassigned in the fund balance for the general fund. Overall, 2024 general fund operations resulted in an increase in fund balance of just over 3.5 million. This amount is inflated from what you would have expected when you did the budget in 2023 because of those ARPA funds. However, there will be an anticipated reversal of this increase in 2025 when the unassigned funds specific to the 2 Lincoln Street renovation are expended. Like I had mentioned, that assignment alone was $2.8 million. So those expenses from the renovation will hit the expense section of the general fund in 2025's financial statement. And you'll see in theory, you'll see a large reduction in fund balance next year when those funds are used. On the proprietary funds, these are the enterprise funds: water, sewer, and wastewater, or sanitation and wastewater. These funds are meant to be self-sustaining, and in fiscal year 2024, all of these funds had positive increases in net position. Also on the proprietary funds is EJRP, which also had income in 2024 of $275,000. And then on to the footnotes. The footnotes just give a more detailed explanation of various amounts in the financial statements. The capital assets detail shows changes year over year, as well as the depreciation on the capital assets in 2024. The debt footnote is also included in here and shows the terms and the long-term payout commitments on any long-term debt. And for the second year in a row now, there's also the VEMR's footnote disclosure now that the city is part of the state retirement plan. There are no new footnotes in 2024 or no new accounting requirements that require disclosure. Following the footnotes is the budget to actual schedules, which is required supplementary information. This is a good reflection of how the city performed annually in comparison to its budget, and where those surpluses that I had mentioned of the $3 million, what budget categories those were, what they derived from. Then lastly, the other supplementary information is the combining schedules for the various funds within the fund financial statements. As well as the budget to actual schedules for all of the enterprise funds. So the EJRP, as well as the water, sanitation, and wastewater fund. That is all I have, but I'd like to open it up for questions if there are any.
Great, thank you. Jess,
Yes,
did you
thank
have
you.
anything did you want to add to this, or
Not for me.
before we start? Jess?
Nope, I'm good.
I appreciate the fact that we're hearing, again, no findings, controls are solid, and that things went smoothly. Very much appreciate that. This is a pretty dense read. I got through just about all of it over the weekend. And yeah, any questions from council? Marcus?
Just real quick, and again, great job, Jess and team, on again providing just a solid financial accounting and record, and coming through this audit again, A+. Really appreciate all that effort and work. Just a quick question on the audit process. Do you provide to our team, do you provide, I don't want to call it areas of improvement, like, do you provide suggestions, recommendations on ways that we can continually improve this process? I would consider it more of a skill up versus like there's something wrong, we're trying to fix it. Is there ways that through this audit process you work with our team to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. We would always take the opportunity like to share best practices. I don't remember anything specific that Jess and I may have discussed this year. Honestly, this year was a little tough because I didn't even mention it was a remote audit, so there wasn't much face-to-face contact at all with the renovations going on. But yeah, we take any opportunity we can to just share best practices as that we come across things. I do believe 2 years ago, one of the key control thing was something that Jess really wanted to bring over anyway from her past experience outside of the city, but something we recommended as well because a lot of the controls were still being used from the town documentation. But yes, overall, we are definitely open to sharing any suggestions that we have. It makes our lives easier, honestly. And one thing I will say about Jess and her staff is she's already reached out a few times. I know there's some potential congressional funding coming forward, as well as I believe it was a locker system or something, but kind of planning in advance for 2026 fiscal year. And she reaches out ahead of time during this fiscal year just to make sure we're on the same page. We're planning for it. She's doing things the way we would expect, rather than getting into the audit in October and all of a sudden having to put out a fire because something was done incorrectly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Amber? Anything? No? Jess, thank you. Bill, thank you as always.
Yes, thank you.
For the time and for going through this with staff. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. I appreciate you having me.
Any public comment on this? I don't see any folks in the room right now. Want to say anything? No? Anyone online? Any comments on this topic tonight? Not seeing any hands raised. Once again, thanks very much, and I guess we'll move on at this point.
Yes, thank you. Yes, you as well.
All right, going on to 5B, discussion and consideration of a 3 megawatt solar array at Global Foundries, Essex Lot C. You could, come on up, introduce yourself for us and take us through this.
Good evening. My name is Jake Clark with Encore Renewal Energy. Encore is a Burlington-based solar developer. Encore will be developing, building, owning, and operating this project on the Global Foundries campus. I think that before I get into the specifics of this solar project, it's useful to just take a step back and go through, as I think you're all aware, Global Foundries sought and indeed was given permission by the Public Utility Commission to effectively operate as its own utility, and in some ways sort of disconnect from buying all of its power from Green Mountain Power. And as a part of that, now that Global is effectively operating as its own utility, Global Foundries needs to comply with all of the programs and laws that all utilities in Vermont have to comply with. So these projects are an effort on the part of Global Foundries to comply with the Renewable Energy Standard, which is often called the RES, the RES. So that's like the impetus from Global Foundries side, the need for these projects. In terms of who Encore is, as I said, we're Burlington based. We've been around here in Vermont since maybe 2007 or so. I was the 10th employee in 2019, and now we're up to more than 50 employees. Quite a sort of good, feel-good local success story, I think. I'd like to mention that part. Most of our employees are based in the greater Burlington area. So then, on to the specifics of this project. You probably all know exactly where this is. In that sort of crook of the Winooski River, there's a large parking lot. At the south end of the parking lot, there are some storage tanks for certain chemicals that are used by the manufacturing facility. This project is 3 megawatts. That's approximately 6,096 panels across 11 acres of the parking lot. This is a fixed tilt racking system, so these are not the panels that track the sun. These are fixed tilt. They're 3 or 4 feet off the ground at the low end and 10 to 15 feet high off the ground at the high end. And as you can see, the rows are oriented east to west, and they face to the south. We will need a fence around the project, even though it's sort of within a secure industrial campus. And the project is interconnecting to right to that building that's just to the north of where the solar project is. So it's some of the other projects sort of are using GMP distribution network equipment or GMP owned substations, but this project is connecting directly into that building. Oftentimes for solar projects, when we're having this presentation of the project to, in this case, the city or to the town or municipality, one of the things that we need to talk about is what are the impacts associated with the project? And in this case, I would contend that the impacts are extremely limited. We're building on a parking lot. It's an existing parking lot that's not really in much use by Global Foundries. And we often talk about like the aesthetic impact or the visibility of the project. And this particular location is not really visible from hardly anywhere off the campus because it's surrounded by the trees. And on the other side of the Winooski River, as you also know, is the Williston side of the Global Foundries campus. So it's pretty securely located, and the visible impact is extremely minimal. You might be able to see it from 1 or 2 places that are high elevation elsewhere in Essex Junction, but I really doubt it.
Discussion around removing the pavement prior to this?
Yeah, it is something that has been considered. There's a lot of underground utilities that connect to those storage tanks to the south, and there are also electric utilities running through there. In order to remove the pavement, we'd have to remove not just the pavement but also the sub base. And I think that the concern is that would implicate a lot of stormwater issues during construction, and then also we'd have to bring in soil to revegetate. And I think that those sort of the removal of the pavement and then the importation of soil would have a drastic effect on the economics of the project. I would like to point out also, it's a good question. Anywhere that Encore can, we like to commit to either a pollinator ground cover or grazing sheep underneath the panels. And for some of the other projects on the campus, we will be able to run with either pollinators or sheep. This is not one of them. So we did consider removing the pavement. At this time, it's not something that we're seeking to do. The other thing is, because there are underground utilities running through that parking lot, the easiest installation type for the racking is what's called ballasted racking, and that could either be sort of concrete blocks, or they look sort of like boxes of stones, geoballast. And that type of racking doesn't use any ground penetrations. And that makes the installation over a parking lot with underground utilities much safer. So that was another consideration. So that's sort of like the high level look at what the project is. We talked about why Global Foundries is pursuing the solar. The primary permit that Encore needs to procure from the State Public Utility Commission is the Certificate of Public Good. And we have 2 of those CPGs, as we call them, for the phase 1 projects. One of those CPGs is for the Essex A parking lot solar, which is to the north of this one. And the other one is for the project E, which is on some open fields between Redmond Road and the buildings on the Williston side. That state certificate of public good process is really comprehensive. The state looks at all of the natural resource impacts. They're looking at the interconnection. They're looking at system stability and reliability. I've in this slide deck, I've listed out some of the, it's just a very comprehensive process. But the reason I mention this is one of those statutory criteria for the certificate of public good is, does the project comply with the city or the town plan? And for that part, it's really helpful for the Public Utility Commission to have an affirmative determination from the city that says the city has reviewed its city plan and the city finds that the project does comply with the city's plan. So if there were a request coming out of this consultation or review process with the city, that would be the request on my end.
I love these. I'd love to hear, we've heard this once or twice at least. I always think it's just mind-boggling. Ask this question, or someone asks this question. How much power, what's the equivalent?
Yeah, so 3
3
megawatt.
megawatts, how many minutes is that?
How many minutes?
How many minutes of usage is that? How many days or minutes of usage is that?
I mean, it's hundreds of megawatt hours. There's thousands of megawatt hours in it. But the way I like to talk about it, and I was an engineer once, I'm not really an engineer these days, is 1 megawatt is enough to power several hundred homes, depending on the home type, the region, the climate, the energy use. So this would be enough power to power several hundred homes for a year.
I guess in terms of their fab though, I think the last one of these we came through, I think the answer was something like 1 or 2%.
Right. So the intent from Global Foundries side, and I see that Jeff Cram here is here in the meeting from Global Foundries. He's the facilities manager who manages Global Foundries sort of power procurement and power planning. So Jeff could probably speak to this, but the intent at the outset was to generate somewhere on the magnitude of 20 to 25 megawatts of energy from solar on campus. And that would make a material difference to Global Foundries' energy needs on an annual basis, but it's not going to be 50% of their energy demand, right, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you, Jake. Jeff Cram, I'm a senior manager in the facilities team here at Global Foundries. So if we get the 15 to 20 developed that we're in motion for right now, at a peak production time, it could be 40 to 50% of what we're using at that very moment. Over the course of the year, it probably is only 3 to 7% of our total usage. So it's a fairly energy intensive process for manufacturing. So this is one of those that we'll be able to consume whatever we can generate, whatever Encore can generate, we'll consume at the time of production.
I think anytime you can add this to the mix, it's great.
Yeah.
And I think that their efforts to conserve, their efforts to produce on site in a renewable way are fantastic. This seems like a win from my point of view. It's on a very underused parking lot, or used if at all. As you mentioned, it's largely hidden. All of it's going to be used on campus. I don't see a downside to this at all.
That's how we feel about it. One thing to note is that, some other energy intensive consumers or utilities could procure green or clean electricity from wind farms in Iowa or Kansas, but that also implicates a lot of use of transmission systems and distribution systems, which could need upgrades. And in that way, you could say that those types of power purchase contracts are sort of externalizing some of the need for that infrastructure, whereas here, where we're generating all of that electricity where it will be consumed, we're not putting any additional burden on Velco's transmission system or GMP's distribution system.
Are there any Questions or comments from council?
Quick question. I don't, this really is about just curiosity more than anything else. Because you still have a lot of parking lot here to potentially use. But at the same time, even that part of the parking lot that's being used, could you not continue to put solar here? You just put it at a height at which, again, setting it up so that people have a place where they're now under covered parking to a certain extent and create that kind of environment in order to continue on building onto this renewable plan.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. For one of the other potential projects which we are considering, we are looking at that type of racking, which we would call a solar carport installation. Encore has actually developed and built the largest solar carport in Vermont. It's at the parking lot for the museum on the waterfront in Burlington.
Echo.
The Echo Center.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. I'm a member and I can't think of it all. But those installations are really complex because the solar on the top of those foundations is pretty large, and they can act kind of like a sail and like pull the whole thing down if it's not really installed very soundly. So they also require a lot of steel and concrete foundation underground. Those piers go down like 20 or 25 feet at the Echo Center. So it dramatically increases the cost of the installation and thereby also the cost of the energy to Global Foundries. But it is something that we are considering.
Recording in progress.
Sorry.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Are there, you alluded to this, but are there plans, what are the thoughts for future solar projects in the next 3 or 4 years?
So there were 3 projects in what we called phase 1. One Essex A on that north parking lot, which will be in construction maybe by the end of the year and in operation sometime in 26. The other 2 in phase 1 are on the Williston side, and they're on about the same schedule. And then in this phase 2, there's this project on the Essex Junction side, and there are 2 more on the Williston side that will be seeking the CPGs for at this, contemporaneously with this project. And we're sort of scouring the entire campus, all the property that Global owns, to see if there are locations for potentially a phase 3. We've used sort of all of the really viable, really good sites, but we are hopeful to find some more places on campus for solar.
Mr. Graham, anything else that you wanted to add to this since you're here? Just glad you joined us. Just want to give you another opportunity if there's something you want to share.
No, thank you for having Jake and our team in today to discuss this. But I think we're excited about these projects. Between the 3 in phase 1 and 3 in phase 2, we're really looking forward to having these online here in the next year, over the next couple of years. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
One additional point I would make is like timing. And I mentioned that if we had a request, it would be for a determination that the project does comply with the city's plan. And I just wanted to say there's plenty of time for that determination to be made by the city. We won't file our petition for their certificate of public good until the end of April, early May. And even once we file that petition, it's like a quasi-legal proceeding at the PUC, and it could take 8 months, it could take 16 months. And the first few months of that are sort of an opportunity for the city to weigh it. So there's not really like a crunch on time at this moment for that determination.
So the Planning Commission also received this presentation at their last meeting, and I understand there were no concerns from them as well. It doesn't sound like any concerns here from the council. So staff can definitely take a look at that review and provide that letter for you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate the commitment to renewables, the commitment to the facility, and what we've seen happen there. So thank you for that.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming out.
Thanks.
Nice meeting.
All right. How are we doing this? All right, so, correct. Nope, this is personnel, actually. We bought even more time. Discussion and consideration of the general rules and personnel regulation amendments. Then the MOU. I know, we're all over the place, sorry. Yes. It is page 132. Nope,
1:30.
130, yep, sorry.
Okay.
It's so
So
close.
can I bring up one in regards to this? Because there was one point that I highlighted in my own notes in reading this particular portion. There's a note in here concerning section 214, which makes some edits based on the library MOU that we're also considering tonight. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't actually talk about the library MOU before we talk about this, because there's a portion of this document or the personnel piece that is dependent upon the other. I'm sorry, I didn't
That-
recognize that earlier, but
Yep, that
See
is a
that.
good point. So,
Well,
we
from
do-
Susan's point of view, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we do have a lane, so we could adjust the agenda
Can we?
again and just reapprove it.
I will. I'm trying to think about how to do this. I will, that sounds like a great idea. Move that we, let me get the wording in my head. Oh my goodness, what is it? Move that we make business item 5C, that we switch business items 5C and 5D. Elaine, this will make no sense to you because we have annihilated the agenda at this point to make sure that you could be here for the most interesting topics of the evening. And so, is there a second?
Grateful for your consideration.
Of course.
I'll second.
Excellent. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. All right. Library MOU. And I'm, Colleen disappears for a moment. And I'm hoping we have Jean, Christine, and Wendy in the meeting already for this. So we can go through that.
Yes, it looks like it.
Keeping up, the three of you? Yeah. with that?
Okay, so now we are on packet page 85 for folks to follow along. So what is in the packet here is an MOU that has been worked on collectively between a working group of 2 members of the council and 2 members of the library trustees. I think I'll speak to myself to answer George's question on the reason for why this is coming forward. There, among lots of things, there's many new things in the city, myself included, as well as a new chair of the library trustees, and just trying to sort things out. And from my opinion, libraries are probably set up in the most complex way possible in the state of Vermont, between an elected body for the library trustees themselves, as well as trying to understand the council's roles and also as an elected body. So it made sense to think through this. There was also a new legislation that was put into place last year, I'm gonna say. I'm seeing some heads shaking, yeah. So it really, at the state level, they tried to clarify some of these relationships, which in one hand only kind of confused us a little bit further. So it made sense to take the time to kind of spell all of this out and make sure everybody's in agreement on roles and responsibilities between the 2 boards. So what you've got in front of you is a document that lays out those roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, you know, as is pointed out in the beginning of this document, and according to how the state considers library entities and the way they describe them, Brownell is a hybrid, which, coupled with our charter and the legislation that was passed at the end of the last biennium, really required some clarification in terms of, I'll just call it roles and responsibilities and management and decision making. So, is there any comments, questions, concerns about this? I'm sure council has had a chance to read that. I know Jean and Christine have read this through multiple times. This is new to Tim, Elaine, and Marcus. Amber and I and Regina have been working on this for some time. Brownell trustees have discussed this multiple times through this process as well.
Elaine has her hand up.
I barely see that. Elaine, sure, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I need to change the color of my hand. No one ever sees it. So, I just have an observation and a question. And thank you to everyone involved for coming together and making this MOU possible. I want to ask a question or make a comment regarding on page 4 of the MOU under the budget section where it says any library fundraising or donations by the Library Foundation or other like group will supplement funding from the city general fund rather than supplant it. I really want to specifically thank folks for putting that in there, because there have been incidents in other libraries in other parts of the state where a library's fundraising capacity led local leaders to decide that they didn't need as much money from the general fund. And so I really am grateful that that distinction was made. And so for Jean and Wendy and Christine, I would say this is something that gives you and your foundation an opportunity to really focus on fundraising. So I think that's a really good addition. My question is, this is just a small one, not like putting a monkey wrench in the works or by any stretch, but under legal support on page 5, it says the city shall provide to the library support on legal matters concerning questions, claims, or suits involving property, casualty, liability, and personnel issues. Do those 4 categories include First Amendment issues? What happens if the library is sued over censorship or having a book on the shelf that someone doesn't feel should be in there? Does that fall underneath that, or do we need to specify by adding First Amendment cases or something like that?
I'll speak for myself. I don't know that we talked about that in particular. I would think that if the library department, just like any of our other departments, are sued for any reason, the city would step up to support that effort.
Yeah, I mean, my reading of this and my understanding through the whole process, you know, so going through this is very much a collaboration, right? There was a lot of sourcing of content in this from other examples, and I'd love to hear from Jean and Christine on this too. There was a lot of sourcing on this from other examples from other communities. Some of it, if I'm honest, is a little redundant. I mean, we've stated in here that the library is a city department. And in my mind, as a city department, the answer to your question is the city would 100% fully back, defend, represent, and support the library just as we would Public Works or anyone else. That's my understanding of this. So while I would say that this is a little bit redundant, I think there was a concern. I don't know how this, you know, in this particular paragraph, I'm not sure how it arrived here. I don't mind it being there because I think it's also implied by the fact that this document states that the library is a city department. So if that does that answer it? And I mean,
It does. I agree with you that it's implied. My concern is that sometimes it can be said that all powers not enumerated are not necessarily covered. So in the case of a First Amendment challenge, I would just be concerned. But if you feel that it is sufficient, I'm totally fine with that. And I don't think we've ever had a First Amendment challenge. So it's not like we've got experience doing that, but it could happen in the future. And I just want to make sure all the potential issues are covered. But I'm fine, if we decide to leave it this way, totally fine.
I mean, Jean or Christine, did you have? Yeah, great. So I'm just going to explain. Some of you are very, very tiny on the screen I'm seeing, even on the giant screen. So if I'm struggling to recognize you, do speak up. Sorry, go ahead.
Jean, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Okay. There you go.
All right, sorry about that. So Jean Grant, I'm chair of the Brownell Library Trustees. And I think that's a really good point, Elaine, but there is something else in the MOU earlier on page 3 under, let's see, the main heading is setting library policy. It's the last paragraph in that section above library closures. And we actually did put something in about maintaining a library material selection that does conform to First Amendment. So we did put something in there about, I mean, I don't know if that makes you feel any more comfortable.
You know, I read that and totally glossed over it once I got to that follow-up section. So that feels really clear to me. Thank you.
We did that very much on purpose. We added that at the end, just
Great.
because.
And that was from somebody else's,
Yeah.
either South Burlington or Williston's MOU. And I thought that would be a great thing to add. So.
I was just going to point out that this was reviewed by legal counsel as well.
Thank you. Marcus, Tim? Marcus?
Do you want to know? I did want to bring up, I did note after reading, similar to what was mentioned earlier, a little bit of a concern around the fact that the way that this is written with the library trustees in coordination with the library director have the authority to close the library due to inclement weather, safety, employee funeral, etc. If the employees trustees close the library employees shall receive full pay during normal working hours. I was a little concerned about this because of, again, our responsibility to staff and staff budget. There is a mention later on, I'll bring it up. I want to be clear around operating budget and what that covers. But the other part of that too was whether or not it needed, I mean, again, the city manager is responsible for all city departments, of which this is one. I'm not saying that the library trustees should not have this particular ability necessarily. I'm just wondering if nothing else, this can be theirs and the city managers, if nothing else, because I can see, especially in a safety scenario, that decision needs to be made very quickly. And with this particular language, I wonder if it requires a quorum of the trustees to make those decisions versus this is the chair of the trustees or the city manager who can make those snap decisions in moments where a snap decision is required or only available to them. So that was my concern and question there. Below that, on page 4 at the top, again, the library trustees being responsible and submitting annually on the operating budget for the library and the building. I just, for clarity's sake, does that include personnel or not? So I'd like a little clarity around.
Repeat the first part of that, sorry.
Whether or not, because it says that they're going to submit annually an operating budget for the library and the building.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to be clear if that included personnel.
That's part of their operating budget.
Correct. It does.
Yeah, their department operating budgets include the entire entity.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So
Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is all department budgets include their salary and benefits lines.
Yes, the salary and benefits are within the library operating budget. Typically, how it's developed thus far, the departments fill out all the other lines, and the finance department, because the finance department has all the particular intricacies around salary and benefits,
Yeah.
i.e. health insurance. It's nobody's business which health
Yeah.
insurance plan people are in. The finance department fills in those lines. Then those lines are provided to the departments.
Understood. For clarity, just so you understand where I'm coming from, then it was really less about those numbers because I expect that that'll come out of finance, but whether or not the responsibility or decision-making around whether or not you add an FTE or not, or remove an FTE, you know, those positions come and go. Is that, again, because the city manager is responsible for staff in the city, does that fall on the city manager, or does that fall on the trustees to make that determination in regard to operation of the library?
So, in development of the budget, if a department, library or otherwise, felt like they needed additional staff, it would be on them to communicate that through handing over the budget. And we would work collaboratively through that process to ultimately figure out what I, as the manager, am presenting forward to the council. So that's in the budget development. I would say, once the budget is adopted and in place, the library trustees have the authority to use their budget as they see fit. So let's say something crazy happened, and they felt like they needed to do something different staff-wise. So long as they stay within their full operating budget, they have the authority to do that.
The other thing I'll bring up is under the promoting library use on page 4, library trustees will develop a 5-year strategic plan for the library in collaboration with the library director and library staff. This does not include the language around and public. So in reading this, it felt like these are the only two parties at the table in discussion about their 5-year strategic plan, or is this going to follow a process and it truly include the public as we do with our city strategic plan? So that felt like there was something, it's either missing or just not, I'm not quite understanding, so I just wanted clarity. Under buildings and grounds on page 5.
Okay.
Sorry.
Can we take one question at a time?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I'll say the library has just right now gotten an incredible amount of survey responses to their current effort. So that seems a somewhat friendly amendment. Do we want to get input from the library trustees on this?
Yes, please. Jean? Okay. we
I'm
got
seeing
input?
some
Yeah,
thumbs up. Okay,
I mean,
so,
I would, yes, go ahead, sorry.
just so I'm clear on that one, we can add the public.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, not that I don't believe that you wouldn't, but I'm just, the language there for
That was
clarity.
an oversight.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Under buildings and grounds, the way that this is written too, I'm wondering if language needs to be in here and maybe, or maybe I just need clarity around the process. I feel like there are going to be times when the decision-making could also fall to the capital committee and our capital projects plan. And that it's not acknowledged here that decision could come from there as it mentions, input from the library director and trustees will be considered in prioritizing repairs and initiating improvements.
Sorry, it's not exclusive. There's nothing exclusive about the paragraph. They still have to follow. I mean, the city's responsible for making the repairs. The city's responsible for their own policy on how that's determined and when that happens. So they can help us prioritize, which is welcome and needed. And it gets put through the same, depending on the amount, will get put through whatever process. That's how I understand it. We'll get put through whatever process is appropriate for the dollar amount, I suppose, and the project.
Yes, I think it's true that it's not an all-inclusive statement. The capital committee does not review buildings.
In particular, city buildings.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
correct.
But you might, if it was something structural on the grounds, no?
I don't think so. I was trying to remember off the top of my head, and Jess is still here too, but I think we put an exclusion in for any of the municipal buildings. Yeah, Jess is
sounds
shaking
familiar.
her head as well. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So I take most of that back.
Thank you.
And we'll be not speaking.
That helps. Last thing I wanted to bring up was around, again, coming back to the budget and budget process. Again, because of the fact that we are, as a city council, somewhat limited in the way that we participate, and the library trustees are responsible for the operating budget, I would suggest, or I'll throw out here, that because we go through a pretty significant process of community engagement around budget and presenting the budget, talking about the budget, that because of the fact that they are still responsible for the operating budget, and therefore they're responsible for those lines, that they would participate in a bigger way in presenting that portion of the budget to the community.
What might that look like to you?
Maybe in the like the informational meeting coming up, they would participate in presenting those slides on that department, or in the public in the meetings leading up through the budgetary process, a representative, and it's not the whole, it's not all the trustees, but some representation is there in order to present their portion of it and hear and accept comment and questions from the public while we're going through this particular process.
Elaine, yes, sorry.
I just want to share an anecdote in response to that, Marcus. Many years ago, different manager, long time ago, different manager, different library director, we had a series of town meetings, village meetings, where residents were coming and saying, we want to make changes to the library budget. We want to do this, we want to do that. And the village manager at the time stepped away from the podium and just had the library director fend for herself at the podium in front of the public. Did not do that for any other department. And after a couple years of this, it became apparent that it was the support of the village was not necessarily extended to the library. And so I think the message that sends, where we have all the other department budgets defended by the city manager, but we have to let the library do their own, does not indicate support for the library. So I wouldn't recommend taking that approach. But I don't think there's anything wrong with the approach we have now, where we have budget day and the director and the trustees board chair and others come before us. That's a public meeting and there's notes. I don't think there's anything wrong with the current process we have now, and I wouldn't want to do anything optically to show that we might not support the library 100%.
And I appreciate that anecdote, and that is not by any stretch what I'm trying to suggest or propose. It's just a matter of, again, and I'm sure that the city manager again would participate in this particular process. It's not like, here you go, good luck. But as the trustees are elected officials as we are, and we are responsible for the budget overall. Based on this MOU, they're responsible for this portion and the details therein. It feels like there is a place here where they can participate a little bit more or differently in this conversation. And maybe that is exactly the same. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because of the fact that it feels like, again, I totally want to acknowledge what you've said here. It just feels different because of the fact that we have elected officials in this process versus just department heads. So anyway.
Amber, do you have anything on that?
No, I was just gonna echo Elaine's thoughts. I'm just still struggling with trying to understand the difference as to why we would make the library do that when nobody else is doing it. I also think, and definitely Jean, Christine, Wendy can correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are discussing you're discussing the budget in a public meeting before you're coming to our public meeting to have a discussion about the budget. So I do think there is a public process in which the trustees are actually explaining their logic and stuff to the budget. That's a little bit less stringent than what you're asking for, and they're doing it in a public setting. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to this that I think I completely understand what you're saying.
And I'm not saying that's the way either. I'm totally open.
I think we can accomplish that by inviting a library trustee to some of the events that we do, to spend time in case there are questions that they might be more knowledgeable about answering. But I hesitate to put it in a document like this. This initially started out to be fairly brief. It's a little longer than I think I intended. I think I would love. I mean, I think it'd be an interesting exercise, especially if in the future some of the outreach that we do is more topic based. So instead of having a random coffee chat around the budget, maybe we're out. Are you interested in public works and recreation? Those are the two focus topics we're going to do for this one exercise and outreach. And that might come around to saying, the library and the council are going to, library trustees, a couple of counselors will be, at Brownell, ready to talk about all things library. Come share your thoughts. Or what didn't make this into the MOU, what didn't make it into this MOU, and we didn't really get there, it was just it's an idea, was to make sure some of us in the city council visit the Brownell trustee meetings where they are specifically talking about developing their budget, so that, we're with them, listening to their conversations, their concerns, their process, the challenges they're facing, so that it's not really a new thing when it comes to the council in December. I think I would love to see more of that going forward. Then I don't think you're trying to target them at all. I don't think that's really where you're coming from. I think I get it, but I don't think we need that structure in this MOU. I think there's ways to cooperate around that. And Wendy, I'll stop talking. What did you have to add to this? Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm just to add to what Elaine had mentioned and Amber agreed with. The process, it's also how the boards have worked together, and we work with the city council, city manager. So we may start with a budget process, but we are working with the council parameters. And also once we get to the point I present the budget to Regina, or the city manager, whomever it is. It's been changed over the years. And then once it's adopted, it's endorsed by the city manager. So it may not be the budget that we started with because it is already discussed and gone through filters of the city process.
Sure, we can definitely have, we can continue to have positive dialogue around this. I would like to not continue to, I'm going to speak for myself personally. I would like to not continue to feel like when I ask a question that I'm opposing the library. I'm really trying to work with everybody and understand it. And so so me bringing this up comes from a place of like, I want to see greater participation, whether it's their side, my side, whatever we need to do. And if it needs to be spelled out or not, I don't know. But like, I just want to find that place so that we can work and feel like we're working collaboratively together at the end of the day to provide exactly what this community needs, and what the community has asked for. So that's my hope for the future, so that the community has clarity around our budget in totality. And again, one of the things that we ask of Regina and those other department heads too, and again, I know, Wendy, you're participating in this process too, we just need to be able to, when the public asks us a question about any department, library included, we're able to answer those questions to the best of our ability. So, yeah, anyway. Thank you.
The only other thing I'll put to that is, like, this document is intended to kind of put the background to rest, to kind of set a base so that all of that stuff can sort of continue on. I think in the past 18 months or whatever, 2 years, there have been some open questions and some, especially with past legislation, some struggles to figure some of this out. And that's sort of taken up a lot of the air in the room. And I think my hope with this is that we've had these great conversations and this great process. I think there's a lot of understanding and relationship here. I think that putting a lot of this on paper and moving past it will allow for a lot of, I think, what you're trying to get at, which is that relationship building, cooperation, joint communication, focusing on the mission, which is really the mission of the city as well, and moving forward. So I think, just to kind of reiterate the purpose of this.
I'll just add one thing to that too. Just my favorite topic of what's going to solve all our problems is the strategic planning effort and just sort of the process associated with that. So, the idea, we're still in the infancy of this, but the idea is that Wendy mentioned that, the departments work within the parameters set out by the council. And so, in a situation where we may see a particular department needing some kind of larger change, ideally, we are thinking that through and having those conversations early, like in the spring, so that everybody's a little bit on board with whatever parameter changes need to happen in the future fiscal year. Outside of those big changes, hopefully there's a good system in place where we're trying to hit a base target, and that's what everybody sticks with. And hopefully the system goes much smoother. But if and when we do have bigger changes, which we will, like it or not, in the springtime, we'll be able to have a process that we're all preparing ourselves for that in a better way.
Can I just ask one question? And I really was just going to say, hey, you guys have worked on this. I'll take you, trust your judgment. But there was an event today around 2:00 at the library that ended up with the power being disrupted to the elevator. If that had turned into a bigger event and the library was closed or had to be closed, that decision, according to this, would lie with the trustees and the library director. But if it was a snap decision that had to be made and people were sent home because the library wasn't able to be reoccupied, would that leave them without their pay? That's my only concern. By limiting the scope of what can close or who can close. If it is a quorum of trustees and you can't gather a quorum and the library director isn't available for whatever reason, but literally the building isn't able to be reoccupied, have we just cut staff out of their pay?
So I'll say for myself, and I'm curious, library folks, what you think. I hadn't really thought through this concept of whether a quorum is necessary for this decision on the library trustee side. Any thoughts from you all?
You know, we've discussed it a bit, not in great detail. We were thinking that, you know, at a trustee meeting after the MOU was approved, that we would come up with some steps for how that was going to happen. The decision to close or not. But that has not been determined.
I'll just add to some of the examples that have been made, and this may be eyebrow raising for some. This gives, in my mind, the library trustees the ability to make this decision because it's been asked for in the past and there's been some discussion around instances where there was debate. I don't read this as removing the manager's ability to close when it requires it. I read this as adding an ability for the library trustees that did not exist.
Great, that's,
So and I'm happy to adjust this to make some of these things clear, and maybe we can probably get that done right now. It's probably pretty simple. But my understanding throughout this was in a situation like you're describing and has been described earlier, there's nothing in here that says that the chief executive of the community can't say this is a public safety risk, we're closing the library.
and
This
again,
says, you know, like this is more our intention behind this. Sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
no,
our intention behind this was, I think, you know, there was one of the examples given earlier was, you know, the eclipse. There's been some, so anyway, that clearly has got planning behind it. It's a known event coming up.
Yeah.
It may differ in the approach of the entire city. And there's plenty of time for the trustees to meet and make a decision around that.
Yeah.
In the case of a safety emergency, there might be consultation with the trustee chair and the library director and the city manager. They might talk. That'd be great. I would hope that it wouldn't be delayed by trying to round up 5 of the 8. So I don't know if we require any clarification in here for any of that.
I think we could easily clarify the language to make that clear. I will say, using today's example, Wendy texts me right away. She texts Ricky and myself. We're in the know. She keeps us posted. If we had to close the building, we would know we had to close the building.
and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, because as you said, I'm new to this document. I just wanted to make sure we weren't limiting anything, and that in the event of something that our employees are still fairly for the, you know, circumstances beyond their control.
I've also just want to add that we're open later than every other department, and we're open on Saturdays. And there have been situations where we cannot get in touch with and really anybody in real time when there has been like a power outage or something like that, a long-term power outage, and that has occurred on occasion. And it is also still will be checking in with the city manager if I can't get in touch with them. But we've had it hasn't happened in years, but that has happened where we can't get in touch with somebody. And for weather related things, I'm always in touch with Public Works and whether they can keep our area safe.
Can I just hop in to add one more thing? Everyone here is covered by open meeting law, and there is a provision for emergency meetings, and they have a 24-hour window. So if folks have to come together and make decisions, and they make decisions in the moment, they can come together after and ratify what they've done. So like the question about quorum shouldn't be an issue either.
Thanks for that, Elaine. So is there feeling, just trying to close this topic, is there feeling that there needs to be additional clarification in this paragraph, or are we comfortable with the conversation we just had that this is under control?
I'll leave off. I'm comfortable.
The only thing is, so this will be both here and in the personnel regulations, where expressly saying, except for the library, the city manager may close the city department except for the library. So I do think we probably need a slight clarification there.
Well,
It could,
the solution would be to take out except for the library. One solution could be that we do that. What would the
would be okay with
ramification of that be?
then the essentially what's that's saying is the city manager can close as well as the library trustees can make the decision to close.
Jean and Christine, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, I just need to read it one more time.
Being 3 sentences, 3 lines above.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay. That
Wendy,
okay
you
with,
think you're good with that?
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm good with, we just need to have plans in place and that they don't contradict, and I think previous documents have contradicted those. Live documents have contradicted each other, so yeah, this is a good move in the right direction.
Okay, great. Sounds like that's amenable to everyone. Excellent. Is there anything else we had? Okay. So moving up, going back to Zoom. And that is the council and Brownell trustees and library director portion of the conversation for now. Is there anyone online that has any comments or questions on this topic before we continue? Not seeing any hands raised while we wait. Is there anybody in the room that has any comments or questions on this topic that? Yep, I'm sorry, can you just, sometimes I forget I can hear you, but nobody else can. Sorry.
I guess I just asked, based on my initial remarks, how you feel about my assertion that the budgetary process, as it's mentioned here, would be in violation of the charter. And you mentioned that they control the budget. So I don't know if there's other documents somewhere, but I think the charter would take precedence.
Thanks, just gonna look.
George, I'm not following your question actually, so sorry, can you come back?
So it says, library trustees will work with the library director to make changes within established annual budget line items as needs change throughout the year within the context of the budget. The charter, under paragraph 905, says that only the manager may make any transfer.
So I think that the distinction is between what the MOU is intended to say, is that the operating budget for the library can shift within the operating budget of the library. That,
But no other department can do that under the charter.
the charter means that if a change needs to be made from one budget category to another budget category, that's not within the department's purview. Within the department is within the department's purview.
Well, the first sentence in 905C does say, the manager may at any time transfer an unencumbered appropriation balance of portion thereof between general classifications of expenditures within an office, department, or agency. May, it doesn't exclude anyone else in that department from doing, I think, what she's explaining. That's how I would read it. I read that and not having an attorney present, but I'm reading that as simply enumerating an ability of an employee.
I
Yeah,
I
so,
wondered why I just My interpretation was that only the city manager can transfer funds within a department, between operating lines. And that if it's between departments, then it has to happen through the council, so.
Think- Um, okay. Let's go back to Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands on Zoom, so we'll bring it back to the council, and we have made a change to it, which is fine. Going back to the memo. There is a recommended motion on page 85 of the packet. I would just ask whoever makes it to add as amended somewhere that makes sense in that.
So,
Go ahead.
I'm-
sorry. Before we jump to that, can I ask Regina, I mean, do you feel that we should get an attorney ruling on this, legal ruling on this, and whether or not that the concern brought up by George is valid?
We had legal review of this already. We have definitely asked multiple times about this particular question of what the library trustees have control over. I am nearly confident that the library trustees have control to do what they can do within their operating budget. The purpose of this MOU is partially to help clarify the distinctions between state statute, our charter, and where we land between those two documents. Both of those documents kind of point back to each other about which takes precedent on multiple things. So when it comes to the library, I'm pretty confident that this is correct. I am confident that you adopt this tonight. I'm happy to circle back and ask this question again. And we can change it if need be going forward, but I'm pretty confident.
Yes. You have your hand up?
Yeah, I completely 100% agree with what Regina just said. Keep in mind, we also have a process where financial statements are being issued every month to every department head and the public because they go into council packets. Regina and I are checking in on those every month and in constant coordination with the department heads on potential overages in budget lines. So that it's a open communication that's happening on a regular basis. So Regina is, although may not formally be approving something, she is aware of it.
Elaine, I think you were about to jump in there, but I wasn't sure.
I was about to make the motion.
Is everybody comfortable with that? All right, go for it. Thank you.
I move that the City Council approve the Memorandum of Understanding by and between the City of Essex Junction City Council and the Brownell Library Board of Trustees as presented as amended.
I'll second. Great. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Motion passes unanimously. Wendy, thank you. Jean and Christine, thank you very much for all the time and effort that went into this. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to working together more in the future. Yeah, thank you very much.
You too. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
All right, I'm gonna try to make sense of this. We are going to discussion consideration of general rules and personnel regulation amendments. Just gonna call that 5D. I think, I don't even know.
I'm sure the minute takers will be very happy.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, yeah,
Okay, so now we are at
page 130.
Okay, so Colleen is here with us. online. This is a big document, the general rules and personnel regulations. A lot of what's in here is to reflect the changes from the association contract that was just adopted a number of months ago. It also is intended to follow state and federal rules. So for the most part, this is a technical update. This document hasn't been looked at in quite a while, so also there are the changes of bringing it from the village to the city. There are a couple of sections that we know that we will need to return back to take a look at, that we haven't really been able to take a look at now. Two of those sections are the mission, goals, and value statements of the organization. I think at this point, we've really would be best served by an effort of really sort of taking a look at those, thinking through it with staff and the council to really update that. We've also have a flag from VLCT when they first looked at this policy about how the fire department is categorized, that we still need to take a look at and circle back to. Otherwise, what you've got in your memo is also bringing forward a variety of different policies that the trustees have adopted over time. And we're kind of bringing those into the envelope of the personnel regulations itself, mostly because it's hard to remember that all of these other little policies exist. So that's what you've got here. Colleen, anything you want to add?
I think you said it all, Regina. Thanks.
All right, any questions from council? Elaine?
Yeah, I have a question, just a favor, really. Can we see a copy of this with all the strikeouts removed? That'd be really helpful.
That would be wonderful.
I should have given you both.
It's
We all thought it.
It's also not, it will be reorganized, but it was impossible to reorganize with keeping the track changes, so.
Now, Elaine, do you want to see that prior to approving?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. Marcus?
This is not to request a change at this point. If nothing else, I'd like to see clarity in the future and us take a look at this. So I was specifically looking at, I've been trying to find that section again, so my apologies. Let me get back to, let me just find the actual piece. Apparently I have to update my computer.
You have 10 seconds.
I'm kidding. You know, I only need a little extra RAM to deal with these very large files. It's a section dealing specifically with grievances and concerns from employees and staff. I noticed as I looked at the language here, you know, the language in here is specific to non-association employees. So then when I went over to the association agreement and looked at it, I didn't feel like I had complete clarity on the process for an employee, because I think that a grievance policy should be just about the same for everybody. I actually can't imagine the policy not being the same for any particular staff member. So I think in the future, I would just like to see us provide some clarity so that any member of staff will know what the chain looks like if they have concerns or grievances or whatever it may be, and how they would resolve those things.
Amber, Tim, anything on this?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Is there a separate policy? I was just flipping through. I don't remember seeing it on cell phone use in vehicles. I know we're a couple years past the whole, you can't drive and use your hand, you have to have hands-free devices, but I was just curious if we had a policy on that.
I can tell you that some department heads, definitely enforce that and are very cognizant of it. But I'm not sure it's spelled out in any document.
Still illegal
Oh,
to operate a motor vehicle while using a handheld device. City employee or not.
Yeah, I
right.
wonder if the question was, it was
Just, yeah,
a
what-
cause for termination? Like, if I.
Yeah, I don't think we need to dig into it. I just wanted to like ask if there was one. I just remember that there was one when I worked for the city of Burlington.
I think the policy does say generally somewhere, Colleen, I think, that you are responsible for following, you can't do anything illegal. I think is what I'm trying to say.
So employees responsible for ensuring the safe use of their cell phones.
That's what we like to refer to as the catch-all phrase.
Don't throw it
Makes
at
sense.
another employee. That
I
is
get
not a
it.
safe use of a cell phone.
Okay.
Appreciate the level of detail in the bring your dog to work section. And I'm very jealous of it. I'm honest.
It's a hot topic in municipalities, I'll tell you that, Raj.
These two. Staff, faculty relations.
My office too.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, I
can make the motion.
Excellent.
I recommend that the city council approve the updated general rules and personnel regulations as presented.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Elaine, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Aye.
Awesome, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks very much. Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot went
Thank
into
you,
this.
Colleen.
All right, I am totally lost. Okay, so we've done that. We must be on to stormwater at this point. Discussion and consideration of ordinance 21 to establish a stormwater utility and warn a public hearing. Hope Chelsea is still here. Thanks for sticking with it.
No worries.
You're like, I'm up next. No, I'm not. Maybe I am. I did tell.
I just hung out and caught up on some emails because I lost track of where I was.
I actually thought 15 minutes ago we better give her a heads up. And I didn't, so sorry.
No worries. All right. So tonight, some of this memo is probably gonna look familiar to you because at least portions of it are similar to last city council meeting for ordinance 19 and 20, but we still have ordinance 21 as proposed outstanding, and that is the ordinance to develop the stormwater utility. There has been some changes to what we initially included in the public hearings in November and December of last year, largely due to a change in opinion of Global Foundries being part of the utility. So we do need to have another public hearing as proper procedure. Also, the Q&A document was circulated around again. I know you chose not to talk about it. at the last meeting, but if you do want to review any of the questions and answers, I'm happy to go over that. So
What page is the Q and A on? It is on page 126 of the packet. Anyone, maybe what we can do, Chelsea, is around that topic, because the ask tonight is, I don't want to say simply, the ask tonight is to warn the public hearing. And in that public hearing, we're going to get a full presentation of this, take comment, and discuss it again. In regards to the Q&A or any of the changes that Chelsea alluded to, are there any specific questions from council that require clarification before warning the public hearing? No, not on this end. Elaine or Amber? No? Okay. Well then. Yeah, Regina, is there anything you want to add into this? Just don't want to skip over anything.
I will just say that we did receive a letter from Global Foundries this afternoon. They don't feel like we have the authority to charge them for the stormwater utility fee. We think our authority, we do have the authority to do that. Regulating water quality, who regulates your water quality is separate from the utility, our authority to do the utility itself. The statutory authority has been added to the beginning of the ordinance itself. And so we think at this stage of the game, from our perspective, we should move forward and warn the utility public hearing. That will be for April 9th. So it does not mean that we are approving the stormwater utility tonight. We are having another public hearing and we'll be approving it after that time.
Remind me of the timeline after that. So we have the public hearing. If the council, the fastest scenario, not necessarily the one we'll follow, would be council holds public hearing. We come back into council session from the public hearing, choose to adopt the stormwater utility at that point. How long, remind me please, because I can never remember this, how long there is, 44 days?
Yep. So according to our charter, when you adopt an ordinance, it becomes effective. There is a 44-day window following that date where folks can petition that approval.
Gotcha. And any material change after the first public hearing requires another public hearing?
Yes.
Not necessarily a second. Okay, great. It doesn't sound like there's any further clarification. This is a rather technical step in the process, I feel like. So I will move on then and move that the city council warn a public hearing on April 9th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. to receive comment on the proposed Essex Junction Municipal Ordinance Chapter 21, an ordinance relating to stormwater utility regulation as amended and with any edits as discussed. I could probably leave that part out. I will amend. We'll just end that motion at utility regulation.
Second.
Sometimes you can read ahead.
Yeah.
In your head. Sometimes. 8:15. Thank you, Amber. All those in favor say aye.
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 And sorry, just one more thing to add to this. It's the ordinance itself, Chapter 21, that requires that public hearing. The other component of how the stormwater utility will work is based in the credit manual itself. The credit manual is not an ordinance and can be adjusted by the council without a specific public hearing.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. That motion did pass unanimously. All right. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you. See you next time.
Did that. Discussion, oh my goodness, the good part. Discussion and consideration of renewal of the city manager contract. 5F, the only letter I could keep up with.
My current contract is through the middle of September 2025 of this year. And I have requested that the council extend it for 2 additional years beyond that.
Simple. Council is in unanimous agreement that we want to continue your contract for 2 more years after ending in September 27. Speak for myself and say that I'm thrilled that you've agreed to extend your contract. I think the community made a great choice 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And that you were the right person at the right time to help us through a much more elaborate and technical separation after 10 years of intentional technical combining of 2 communities, on all the while operating in an incredibly difficult economic and regulatory environment during that time. So obviously I know you didn't do it alone. We had great staff, but I think we're very pleased with your work. Obviously, everybody else will have a chance to speak too, if you want. But grateful that you've agreed to stay, and look forward to, I won't be around for it, but looking forward to seeing how everything develops moving forward. We have negotiated the contract. We just need to sign it at this point. Yeah, so thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else have anything they want to add to that?
I think at this point, she all knows how we feel.
I think she does. I do. I hope so.
If not, please let us know.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it very much. Looking forward to it.
Great. Thank you.
We'll sign that contract at the end of the meeting, after the meeting's over. So thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
All right, that is the end of a very confusing agenda for the most part, for business items. The last item is an executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Hi.
Great. City manager report, council member comments.
This is a signature for the consent agenda item.
Oh, great. Oh, yes, the Cascade Grant.
I really like the drawing in the Cascade grant.
I know, it's pretty exciting.
Hopefully get it.
Hopefully this federal money comes through.
What is the amount?
What was that?
What is the amount of the grant?
It's in there.
$1 billion.
It is in
You have to do
there.
the.
Yeah, it's
It's hard to do.
60.
Mine's the first.
Yeah, we're all looking.
Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Let me see. Page
Oh,
257.
there it is. Never mind. I found it.
No, you got to tell us now.
Just at the same time. Yeah.
Looks like 850.
Yeah, and the grant would fund about 50% of that.
Yeah.
Big grant.
Yep. Okay, manager's report. So also some good news. We have learned CCRPC has received written confirmation from the FTA that the RAISE grant, which is what we are using for the Connect the Junction to a TOD project, is officially obligated. So we can pick up that work again and keep that moving forward, which is very exciting. The first governance committee meeting has been scheduled. That is on Thursday, March 27th at 6:30 p.m. Location to be determined. And the Rec Advisory First Committee has been scheduled as well. That is on Wednesday, April 2nd at 6 p.m. Also, location be determined. It's tricky time to add 2 more committees into the line.
Bring my minds.
And that's it.
Anybody have anything else? Nope. All right, great. The executive session motion is.
I have it here.
Oh, please do.
I move that the city council make the specific finding that premature disclosure of the confidential attorney-client communications regarding a probable litigation would place the city at a substantial disadvantage. I move that the city council enter into executive session to discuss confidential attorney-client communications regarding probable litigation pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1E and 1 VSA 313A1F to include the city council and the city manager.
I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. We will not be coming back with any decision. So for meeting's sake, that will effectively end the broadcast portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming out.